6 months in a coma, ignored by her own family, suffocating under lies. Until one doctor's defiance woke her up. But what if her family didn't want her to wake up at all? You won't believe what happens next. Watch to find out. In the sterile and quiet environment of St. Augustine's Hospital, the steady hum of machines was the only sound that broke the silence. The cold clinical atmosphere was filled with a sense of detachment, where every corner and every object seemed designed for efficiency, yet nothing could mask the underlying sense of loss. Olivia Goyen lay motionless in her bed, her once vibrant eyes closed and hidden behind heavy lids. The bruises from the accident had faded, but they had left a much deeper mark, one that no doctor could treat. For 6 months, Olivia had been locked in a coma after a devastating car crash that seemed to have no explanation. The Mercedes she had been driving collided with a guardrail on a rainy night, and no one could quite explain why she hadn't regained consciousness. Her family, the powerful Goyen dynasty, had been shaken by her accident. Olivia had always been a force in the world of technology and business, a rising star who built her empire from the ground up. The crash had not only taken her out of the public eye, but also left her parents and younger brother Daniel struggling to hold together the empire she had spent her life building. But despite the wealth and influence surrounding Olivia, her body remained unresponsive, and the cause of her condition remained a mystery. The doctors were perplexed, and the family had been advised to prepare for the worst. Among the staff, there was one person who was determined not to give up on Olivia, Dr. Aiden Lee. At 30, Aiden was relatively young in his medical career, but had already made a name for himself as a dedicated and empathetic doctor. His eyes, dark and full of resolve, had never left Olivia's side during the 6 long months she had been in a coma. Unlike many of the other doctors and nurses who had become complacent, accepting that there was little more they could do, Aiden couldn't bring himself to give up on her. Every time he walked into her room, his gaze would linger on her still form, and his hands would tremble as he adjusted the machines or checked her vitals. On this particular morning, Aiden stood at her bedside, carefully changing the bandages that had been wrapped tightly around her chest. They were stiff and yellowed from neglect, the result of the hospital's bureaucracy and the lack of attention given to the details that truly mattered. The nurses had followed their protocols, but Aiden couldn't ignore the fact that Olivia's bandages were suffocating her, restricting her ability to breathe properly. "Dr. Lee, stop," Margaret, the head nurse, snapped as she entered the room. "You can't just change her bandages like that. There's a protocol." Aiden didn't even glance at her, his focus entirely on Olivia's condition. His voice was low, but there was a defiance in it that made Margaret step back slightly. "Protocol?" he repeated, almost incredulously. "She's been lying here for 6 months with these wrapped too tight. Her breathing is restricted. I don't care about protocol. I care about saving her." Margaret's lips pressed together in frustration. "She's Olivia Guillen, Dr. Lee, a billionaire, a public figure. One wrong move, and her family." "I don't care about her family," Aiden interrupted, his voice sharp. "I care about Olivia, and right now she's been suffocating. I'm not going to let her stay this way." Despite Margaret's protests, Aiden proceeded to carefully cut through the old restrictive bandages. As the fabric fell away, Aiden saw the faint red indentations left on Olivia's skin. His breath hitched. She had been lying in this state for far too long, her body neglected by a system more concerned with appearance than with the actual care of its patients. The weight of his responsibility bore down on him as he replaced the bandages with fresh ones, making sure they were snug but not constricting. As his fingers brushed Olivia's skin, a fleeting moment of warmth passed between them, but it was gone before he could fully understand it. The room fell silent as Aiden finished his task. He stepped back, wiping his hands on his coat, and stared down at Olivia's face. His mind raced as he considered the implications of what he had just done. The tension that had filled the room seemed to dissipate slightly, but there was still a sense of anticipation hanging in the air. He had acted out of instinct, following his belief that Olivia was more than just a body in a bed. There was life in her still, and he wasn't going to let her go without a fight. Aiden's heart skipped a beat when suddenly the heart monitor beside Olivia's bed let out a soft, irregular beep. The sound caused both Aiden and Margaret to jump in surprise. The numbers on the monitor climbed slowly but steadily. 60, 65, 70. Aiden leaned closer, his breath catching in his throat. A faint, shallow rise and fall of Olivia's chest indicated that something, anything, had changed. "What the hell?" Aiden whispered, his voice filled with disbelief. He looked over at Margaret, who was staring at the monitor in shock, her clipboard falling from her hands. The sterile hospital room was now filled with a new energy, a flicker of hope where none had existed before. Aiden stayed at Olivia's side for hours, watching as the steady pulse of her heart continued to strengthen. It wasn't much, but it was a start. Olivia's body was finally reacting, and Aiden couldn't shake the feeling that something more was at play. Her heart rate hadn't just spiked randomly. It was as if she had responded to him, specifically to the moment when he had touched her, when he had been there for her when no one else had. He began to ask himself questions. What if her coma wasn't just a result of the crash? What if it had been something deeper, something intentional? The thought gnawed at him. Olivia had many enemies. Her business empire was vast, and with that wealth came threats. Could someone have deliberately kept her in this state, manipulating her body and mind? It didn't seem impossible, especially in a world where power and money often went hand in hand. But he had no proof, just a growing suspicion. Determined to get to the bottom of it, Aiden dug deeper into Olivia's medical records. He pulled up scan after scan, hoping to find something that would make sense of it all. What he found only increased his suspicions. The CT scans showed minor bruising and a concussion, but there were no significant injuries to explain her prolonged coma. Something didn't add up. It was as if the crash, the trauma, and the subsequent medical reports didn't tell the full story. That evening, as the storm raged outside the hospital, Aiden paced back and forth in his office. His mind was whirling, and he knew he had to find answers. He had already decided he would go outside the system to uncover the truth. There was too much at stake, not just for Olivia, but for everyone involved. That night, Aiden slipped quietly into the hospital's supply room, searching for anything that could explain what had happened to Olivia. Behind some gauze and surgical supplies, he found an unmarked vial of clear liquid. It was strange out of place, and definitely not a standard hospital supply. His pulse quickened as he pocketed it, his mind racing. This was his breakthrough. He needed to know what it was. By morning, Aiden contacted Jake, a trusted lab tech. He handed over the vial and asked him to test it, keeping it all under wraps. Jake promised to get back to him in 2 days, and for those 48 hours, Aiden could do nothing but wait, his mind consumed with the growing fear that he was up against something much bigger than he had originally thought. When the results came back, they were nothing short of devastating. The liquid was a low-dose anesthetic, perfect for keeping someone sedated without knocking them fully unconscious. Aiden's heart sank. Someone had been keeping Olivia in that coma intentionally. It wasn't just an accident. Someone had drugged her, and it was most likely someone within her own family. The realization sent chills down his spine, but it also solidified his resolve. He couldn't let this go. He had to protect Olivia no matter the cost. As Aiden sat by Olivia's side once more, his mind was set. He would fight for her. He wouldn't stop until he uncovered the truth and ensured that those responsible were held accountable. And with Olivia now showing signs of life, Aiden knew he had to act quickly. Her fight had only just begun. Aiden Lee couldn't remember the last time he'd felt so certain. His mind raced with thoughts and possibilities as he sat beside Olivia. Guyan's bed in the dimly lit ICU room. He had always known that he'd be the one to give her a chance, the one who would never give up on her. The initial signs of recovery, however faint, seemed like a miracle, a flicker of hope in an otherwise lifeless situation. But now that he had uncovered the sinister truth behind Olivia's coma, his determination to help her grew even stronger. Aiden leaned forward, gazing at her still face, her dark hair splayed across the pillow. The ventilator hummed softly as it pumped air into her lungs, a constant reminder of her fragility. His eyes moved over the sterile surroundings of the room, the monitors beeping rhythmically, the soft glow of the fluorescent lights overhead, the faint smell of antiseptic. Despite the routine of it all, despite the professional detachment of the staff, Aiden felt an overwhelming sense of responsibility towards Olivia. She wasn't just another patient to him. She wasn't just a wealthy heiress with a name that echoed in the world of tech giants and business empires. She was a woman, a person with her own story, her own struggles, and, he firmly believed, her own will to live. His fingers brushed over her hand, a simple touch, yet it carried a sense of promise. He had made a vow to himself to not let her slip away unnoticed. As the days passed, Aiden began to notice small changes in Olivia's condition. Subtle movements, slight shifts in her breathing pattern. At first he chalked it up to wishful thinking. But as he stayed late in her room, as he talked to her, as he kept the quiet vigil beside her, The changes became undeniable. Something was happening, something that no one had expected. The moment he had changed her bandages, Olivia's vitals had spiked, and for the first time in months, her body had shown signs of life. Aiden was certain there was more to Olivia's situation than met the eye. The scans, the medical records, the doctor's reports, they all seemed too neat, too easy. A mild concussion, minor bruising. Yet no one had been able to explain why she had stayed in a coma for so long. No one had dared to consider the possibility that someone might be keeping her there on purpose. But Aiden was beginning to see it now. This wasn't just an unfortunate accident. Someone had done this to her. And as he delved deeper into her medical history, as he scrutinized every detail, his suspicions only grew stronger. That night, Aiden found himself standing in the hospital's supply room, a sense of urgency driving him. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting an eerie glow on the shelves filled with medical supplies. He was searching for something, anything that could explain what had happened to Olivia. And there, hidden behind rolls of gauze and surgical instruments, he found it. A small vial, unmarked and ominous. The liquid inside was clear, but Aiden knew instantly that it was not something that belonged in a hospital supply room. His heart skipped a beat as he pocketed the vial, knowing he had stumbled upon something important, something that could unravel the mystery that had kept Olivia trapped for so long. The following morning, Aiden met Jake, a trusted lab tech friend, at a rundown coffee shop. Jake's eyes narrowed as he examined the vial, a sense of suspicion rising within him. "Where'd you get this?" he asked, his voice low. Aiden didn't hesitate. "Test it. Fast. I need answers." 2 days later, Jake called Aiden. The results were in, and the truth was worse than Aiden had feared. The liquid in the vial was a low-dose anesthetic, a sedative designed to keep someone in a semi-conscious state without fully knocking them out. It was the perfect drug for keeping someone in a coma-like state, and Aiden knew instantly what it meant. Olivia hadn't just been in a car accident. Someone had drugged her. Someone had intentionally kept her in that state, hidden from the world. The more Aiden thought about it, the more it all made sense. Olivia's younger brother, Daniel, had been at the hospital far more often than necessary. His visits were always at odd hours, and he seemed to have a strange level of control over the hospital staff. Aiden had always found him to be polished, confident, and cold. But now, Aiden saw the true danger lurking beneath his well-groomed exterior. Daniel had motive. He had means. And he had the ambition to take Olivia's empire for himself. Olivia had been the driving force behind the company, and with her out of the picture, Daniel could have everything she had built. Aiden's suspicion grew into a burning need for justice. Aiden knew he couldn't go to anyone for help. The hospital had its own politics, its own secrets. If Daniel had control over Olivia's medical care, then he likely had control over the hospital staff as well. Aiden was on his own in this fight, but he was determined. No matter the cost, he would expose the truth and protect Olivia. In the days that followed, Aiden couldn't shake the image of Olivia lying motionless in her bed. His mind constantly circled back to the day he had changed her bandages when her vitals had spiked in response to his touch. What if she could hear him? What if she was aware, locked inside her own body, waiting for someone to pull her back to life? Every time he spoke to her, he wondered if she could feel it, if his words were reaching her somehow. He spent sleepless nights researching everything he could find about sedatives, about how they worked, about the long-term effects of keeping someone under for so long. The more he read, the more it became clear that Olivia's condition wasn't just the result of an accident. It was the result of a deliberate plan to silence her, to take everything she had worked for. The knowledge only fueled his determination. Late one night, Aiden found himself standing by Olivia's bed once again, his heart heavy with the weight of everything he had learned. He couldn't do this alone. He couldn't take on Daniel and his manipulation of the system by himself. But he would try for Olivia, for the woman who had captured his heart in ways he hadn't even fully realized until now. He needed to protect her, and he couldn't let her down. He leaned in close to Olivia, his voice barely a whisper. "I'll uncover the truth, Olivia. I'll make sure you're safe no matter what it takes." His words were a promise, one that he was prepared to keep no matter how much it cost him. The hospital room was silent, save for the faint beep of the heart monitor. But in that moment, Aiden felt more certain than ever that he would stop at nothing to protect her, to fight for her future. With a new sense of urgency, Aiden began to plan his next move. He couldn't waste any more time. Olivia had already lost so much, and he couldn't let her be taken away again, this time by the very people who should have been protecting her. Daniel's schemes were unraveling, and Aiden would make sure he paid for what he had done. Olivia deserved her life back, and he would be the one to give it to her. But before that could happen, the fight would have to be fought on his terms, with the truth as his weapon. Olivia Guillen's story was far from over, and Aiden would be the one to write the next chapter. Aiden Lee was no stranger to the weight of responsibility. As a young doctor, the expectations placed on him had always been high, but never as much as now. Olivia Guillen had been in a coma for 6 months, and while everyone else seemed to have given up on her recovery, Aiden refused to let her slip away unnoticed. He had broken the rules, gone against the hospital's strict protocols, and changed her bandages himself. It was an act that in any other circumstance could have cost him his career, but it had sparked something inside Olivia. A faint but undeniable change in her vitals, just a small flicker of life. And that flicker, however fragile, was all Aiden needed to convince him that she could wake up. He had no intention of stopping, no matter the personal risk. In the quiet hours of the night, as he sat beside her bed in the ICU, Aiden couldn't help but replay the events over and over in his mind. He was certain there was more to Olivia's situation than just an accident. The more he thought about it, the more it became clear someone had orchestrated this. Olivia's crash on that rainy night, the vague explanations from the medical team, the fact that her family had not been as involved as one would expect. Everything seemed too perfect, too calculated. It didn't make sense. Aiden, with his sharp mind and instinct for detecting inconsistencies, wasn't willing to let it go. He needed to know the truth. Every day he spent hours poring over Olivia's medical files, scanning them for any sign, any clue that could point him toward an answer. The doctors and specialists had written their notes in neat handwriting, outlining her condition, her brain scans, and their theories. But none of them seemed to acknowledge the deeper issue that Aiden felt in his gut. She wasn't just in a coma. She was trapped. She had been silenced, hidden away from the world. He couldn't just stand by and accept that. The more Aiden dug into Olivia's past, the more suspicious he became of her younger brother Daniel. The polished, well-groomed figure who had stepped into the spotlight after her accident seemed too confident, too eager to take control of the family business. Aiden began to put the pieces together. Daniel had been at the hospital far too often, visiting her at odd hours, never bringing anyone with him, never seeking outside medical advice. His presence felt calculated. It wasn't just that he cared for his sister. It was more about the power he stood to inherit if Olivia remained incapacitated. And that to Aiden was the most dangerous kind of motive. Aiden's investigation took him down a dark path, one that made his stomach churn as he uncovered evidence of something sinister. The day he found the unmarked vial in the hospital's supply room, his heart raced. He knew without a doubt that he had found the key to unlocking the truth. It was a vial of clear liquid sitting innocently behind some gauze, but Aiden could feel the weight of it, the significance. His mind reeled. What was it doing here? Why was it hidden away? He pocketed the vial, his heart pounding in his chest. This wasn't just a careless mistake. Someone had intentionally put Olivia in this state. Someone had played God with her life, and Aiden wasn't going to let them get away with it. The following days were a blur. He contacted Jake, a lab tech friend, and arranged for the vial to be tested. Aiden needed to know exactly what he was dealing with. When Jake confirmed that the liquid was a sedative, a low-dose anesthetic designed to keep someone in a semi-conscious state, Aiden felt a mix of anger and disgust. He knew then that Olivia had been drugged, kept in a coma not because of her injuries, but because someone wanted her out of the picture. Someone wanted to steal her life, her empire. And Aiden's mind immediately went to Daniel. The pieces were falling into place, and they painted a chilling picture. The more Aiden dug into the details of Daniel's movements, the more evidence he uncovered. Daniel had access to everything. Olivia's medical records, her treatment plans, even the staff. Aiden felt like he was playing a dangerous game, and with every step the stakes grew higher. If Daniel was involved, this wasn't just about saving Olivia's life anymore. It was about exposing the truth, about taking down someone who would stop at nothing to get what he wanted. As Aiden pieced together the puzzle, he couldn't ignore the growing feelings he had for Olivia. It started out as concern, as a professional commitment to save her, But as the days turned into weeks, as he spent hours sitting by her side, talking to her, keeping her company in the silence of the ICU, something deeper developed. He found himself caring for her, not just as a patient, but as a person. Olivia wasn't just a tech titan, a billionaire heiress. She was a woman with strength, resilience, and a story that had yet to be told, and Aiden was determined to help her tell it. The night she finally showed signs of life, the night her eyelids fluttered, her fingers twitched, and her pulse spiked, Aiden felt a rush of emotion he hadn't expected. He leaned over her bed, whispering to her, "You're not alone. I'm here. I'll never leave you." The words felt like a promise, and Aiden knew in that moment that his feelings for Olivia weren't just about saving her life. They were about something more. They were about a connection that was undeniable, a bond that neither time nor circumstance could break. As Olivia's condition began to stabilize, Aiden's mind didn't stop working. He couldn't afford to relax. Daniel was still a threat, and Aiden knew that Olivia's recovery would only make him more dangerous. Aiden had to act quickly before Daniel realized that Olivia was waking up. He couldn't let her be silenced. Again. She deserved the chance to fight for herself, to reclaim her life. But first, Aiden had to make sure she was safe, that she could stand up for herself in a world that had tried to strip her of everything. Aiden's investigation reached its peak when he was able to secure video footage from the hospital's security system. The grainy images revealed Daniel in a darkened hallway, handing off a vial to a nervous nurse. The exchange was quick, but it was enough. The evidence was clear. Daniel had been involved in keeping Olivia sedated. The idea of his own sisters suffering, all so he could claim her empire, made Aiden sick to his stomach. But now he had the proof he needed. He was going to bring Daniel down, and he would make sure Olivia got her life back. The confrontation between Aiden and Daniel was inevitable. Aiden stormed into the executive lounge where Daniel sat cool and collected like a predator waiting for his prey. The tension in the room was thick. Aiden slammed the evidence onto the table, his voice low and dangerous. "You've been poisoning her, Daniel, keeping her in that coma so you could take her company." Daniel's smirk faltered, but he quickly regained his composure. He wasn't afraid of Aiden. Not yet. But Aiden wasn't going to back down. This was no longer just about a doctor's duty to his patient. This was about justice, about protecting Olivia at any cost. As the days passed, Aiden knew the battle was far from over. Daniel was a dangerous opponent, and Aiden wasn't going to rest until he had exposed the truth for the world to see. But as he sat beside Olivia, watching her regain her strength, watching her begin to come back to life, he knew one thing for sure. He would fight for her no matter what. And when the time came, when they were finally ready to face the world together, they would do it as equals, with the truth on their side. For now, Aiden held on to that hope, knowing that no matter what, Olivia would have a chance to reclaim everything that had been stolen from her. In that quiet ICU room, as the storm outside raged on, Aiden felt something shift in him. This wasn't just about medicine anymore. It was about something deeper, something more personal. And for the first time in his life, Aiden Lee knew exactly what he was fighting for. Olivia was awake, and so was he. They had both been given a second chance, and Aiden wasn't going to let anyone take that away. Aiden had never been one to shy away from difficult decisions, but the weight of this moment felt heavier than anything he had experienced before. The truth about Olivia's coma, the manipulation of her brother Daniel, the discovery of the drugged vial, everything had come crashing down in a way that left him feeling both relieved and unsettled. He had gathered all the evidence, pieced together the mystery, and now it was time to expose the truth. But nothing could prepare him for the aftermath that awaited them. Every detail had been carefully calculated in Aiden's mind. The security footage, the nurse's confession, the medical records, all of it was damning. Olivia's younger brother, Daniel, had plotted to keep his sister incapacitated, not out of concern for her, but because he was after the one thing she had built, her empire. He had been using her state of unconsciousness to cement his place as the head of the family business, the very thing Olivia had worked tirelessly to build. And Aiden couldn't allow that to continue no matter what it took. But even with all the proof, even with all the pieces in place, Aiden knew that taking down Daniel wouldn't be easy. He was a master manipulator, and he had already ingrained himself deeply within their family's network. The very people Aiden needed to help him expose Daniel would be the same people who were aligned with him. But Aiden was determined because what he had seen in Olivia, Her strength, her resolve, her fight for survival had ignited something inside him that couldn't be extinguished. She deserved justice, and she deserved to reclaim her life. As Olivia slowly recovered, every day felt like a delicate balance. There were moments where she would show signs of life, small movements, a flicker in her eyes, but for the most part she was still fragile. Her body had been through so much, months of atrophy, the sedative-induced coma, and the battle to breathe properly. But there was something about her, something that Aiden could sense even when she couldn't speak, that told him she wasn't just a survivor. Olivia was a fighter, and no one, not even her own flesh and blood, could take that away. From her, Aiden was her anchor. He became more than just her doctor, more than someone who held a stethoscope and charted her progress. He became the one person who was willing to stand by her when no one else would. Her family had abandoned her in her time of need, and Aiden had stepped in quietly without expecting anything in return. But as the days turned to weeks, Aiden couldn't deny the growing bond between them. He had saved her life, yes, but it felt like she had saved him in return. Her trust, fragile as it was, gave him a reason to fight beyond his career, beyond his duties. She was no longer just a patient. She was someone he needed to protect, someone he wanted to build a future with. The legal battle against Daniel began to take shape as Aiden continued to gather more evidence. He had called in favors, leveraged relationships with colleagues and friends in law enforcement, and managed to get the proof they needed to take down Olivia's brother. But Aiden wasn't just thinking about the case. He was thinking about Olivia's future. Once they exposed Daniel for what he had done, once they brought him to justice, Aiden knew there would still be so much for Olivia to rebuild. Her empire wasn't just about wealth. It was about her identity, her purpose, and the people she had surrounded herself with. But how would she move forward from the ashes of everything that had been taken from her? How could she reclaim what was rightfully hers? The first major step came when Olivia finally took the stand. Her testimony was raw, unfiltered, and filled with the kind of pain that only someone who had experienced true betrayal could understand. As she spoke about her brother's actions, about the drugs that had kept her trapped in a coma, Aiden felt every word weigh on his chest. She wasn't just exposing her brother's treachery, she was revealing her own vulnerability, her fears, and her desire to heal. But Aiden knew she wasn't alone anymore. She had him, and together they would make sure Daniel paid for what he had done. The courtroom was tense. As Rachel, their attorney, presented the evidence, Aiden watched Olivia. She wasn't just telling a story. She was standing up for herself, for everything she had built, and for the woman she had become through this hellish experience. The judge listened intently as the footage of Daniel handing off the vial, the nurse's confession, and Olivia's own testimony laid bare the full extent of the manipulation. But even with the overwhelming evidence, Aiden knew that this wasn't just a legal battle. It was an emotional one too. Olivia had to face the fact that her own flesh and blood had plotted to destroy her. But as she spoke, Aiden saw the fire in her eyes, the same fire that had been there even when she was unconscious, trapped in her own mind. It was a fire that couldn't be extinguished. But even after everything, after the court hearing, the evidence, the testimonies, Daniel still wasn't finished. He didn't take his defeat lying down. As Aiden and Olivia left the courthouse, that day, they were met with chaos. Reporters swarmed them, cameras flashing, questions flying. But it wasn't the press that had Aiden on edge. It was the looming presence of danger, the feeling that something else was coming. And then, it happened. A figure in a hoodie barreled through the crowd, a flash of metal in their hand. Without thinking, Aiden shoved Olivia behind him, ready to protect her no matter the cost. The attacker lunged, a knife flashing in the air, and Aiden instinctively ducked. Pain seared through his arm as the blade grazed him, but he didn't falter. He grabbed the man's wrist, holding him down until security arrived to take over. Olivia screamed, her hands trembling as she tried to stop the bleeding from Aiden's arm. Aiden grinned weakly, trying to assure her that he was fine, but her panic didn't fade. For a moment, Aiden allowed himself to feel the weight of their connection. She had been through so much already: betrayal, silence, manipulation. And now he had to protect her from everything else. He wouldn't let her down. In the aftermath, as the police questioned the attacker and the media frenzy raged on, Aiden realized that this moment, this fight, was just the beginning. The attack on him wasn't just an isolated incident. It was a message. Daniel wasn't going to go down easily, but Aiden wasn't about to let him win. With Olivia by his side, he had a new purpose. It was no longer just about exposing the truth. It was about making sure Olivia could heal, rebuild, and reclaim her life. As Olivia slowly recovered from her ordeal, Aiden continued to stand by her, guiding her through the painful process of reclaiming not just her business but her life. Together they focused on what mattered most, getting her back to the person she was meant to be, free from the chains that had been placed around her. But the journey was far from over. Aiden knew that the road ahead would be full of challenges, but he wasn't afraid. For the first time in his life, he had something to fight for. And Olivia was worth every fight. The storm outside raged on as Aiden sat by her side, but inside there was only hope. The aftermath of the court case weighed heavily on both Aiden and Olivia, though not for the reasons anyone expected. Yes, the trial had exposed the treachery of Daniel, Olivia's brother, and the financial empire he had tried to steal. But for Aiden, it was the personal toll of everything that had transpired. That left him struggling. Olivia, though recovering, was still haunted by the betrayal that ran deeper than just the drugging that kept her in a coma for months. Her own family had conspired against her, and the real weight of that truth was settling in. She had endured so much already, but now, as she was starting to rebuild her life, it felt like every step forward was a reminder of how far back she had to go. Olivia had been a titan of industry, a woman who had created an empire from nothing, who had once been unstoppable in the business world. But all of that felt like a distant memory now, as she sat in her sleek penthouse, the very place where her brother had plotted her downfall. The media had been relentless, as had the public's insatiable need to know the details of her accident and the scandal surrounding her family. They had built her up to be a hero of survival, only to tear her down when they realized she wasn't, as untouchable as they thought. The tabloids were filled with pictures of her with Aiden, questioning their relationship, calling it a fairy tale with an unlikable twist. The world loved to build people up, but it was more thrilling to watch them fall, and they were waiting for Olivia to do just that. But Olivia wasn't going to fall. Not again. Not ever. What the world didn't understand was that she had already hit rock bottom once, and she had survived. She wasn't the same woman who had entered that coma. No, she had been forged in fire, shaped by loss and betrayal, and she had come out stronger. It wasn't just Aiden's love that had brought her back from the edge. It was her own fierce determination. The same determination that had once helped her take her company to new heights, that was now guiding her towards something new. Something that would be hers. Something real. Aiden, for his part, was struggling in ways that he had never imagined. He had always been driven by his desire to help others, to fix things, to make sure people were taken care of. But with Olivia, things were different. This wasn't just a patient-doctor relationship. This was something much more complicated, something deeper. Every moment he spent with her, every conversation they had, only seemed to bring them closer, but it also brought a rising wave of fear. Fear of not being good enough. Fear of losing her. Fear of being dragged into a world that didn't belong to him. He had been living in a world of privilege for years. He was a doctor, yes, but not a wealthy man. He didn't come from money, and he didn't fit the picture the world was trying to paint of him and Olivia. The press had been cruel, insinuating that he was just a doctor using a millionaire for his own gain. But that wasn't it at all. Aiden knew that no matter how hard he tried, he would always be viewed as less than Olivia. She was the face of an empire, and he was just a man who cared about her deeply. And while he was proud of that, he couldn't help but feel like an outsider looking in at her world of CEOs, private jets, and power plays. It was a world he had never belonged to, a world where he didn't know the rules. As much as he loved Olivia, he knew that he wasn't equipped to handle the constant barrage of judgment, the expectations, and the scrutiny that came with being involved with someone like her. He feared that one day, all the love he felt for her wouldn't be enough to withstand the pressures of her life, the very life that had once almost destroyed her. Despite these fears, Aiden stayed by Olivia's side. He was determined to fight for her, to protect her, and to be the man she deserved. But there was something that kept gnawing at him, the idea that maybe he was just in over his head. As Olivia regained her strength and confidence, he began to notice the subtle ways in which her family and the world around her were trying to pull her back into the old habits, the old ways of doing things. She had always been a businesswoman, always making decisions that affected millions, but now she had to find a new path, a path where she could build something for herself, something that was not rooted in the empire her brother had stolen from her. The most significant shift came when Olivia made a bold decision to distance herself from the empire she had built. She knew she couldn't keep living a life that was built on power, control, and greed. She had seen firsthand how that kind of life could consume a person, and she didn't want to be that person anymore. She wanted to help people. She wanted to make a difference. So she sold off most of her wealth, funneling it into causes that mattered: education, healthcare, women's shelters. And with that, Olivia made a public declaration. She was done with the world of corporate greed and excess. She was going to build something real, something that would outlive the empire that once consumed her. Aiden watched as she made that decision, and he couldn't have been prouder of her. She had made herself whole again, not just through her recovery, but by refusing to be controlled by the very system that had almost broken her. And while he knew she was still working through the emotional scars, he also knew that the woman in front of him was not the same person who had been trapped in a coma for 6 months. She was stronger now. She was clearer now. And she had made a choice. In the months that followed, Olivia and Aiden built something new together. They created the Aiden Lee Clinic, a place where anyone, regardless of their financial situation, could receive medical care. It was Aiden's dream, but Olivia's business savvy had turned it into a reality. The clinic became a lifeline for the community, offering free services and medical attention to those who needed it most. They worked late into the nights, their hands intertwined in both love and purpose. They had found their rhythm. There were still challenges ahead, but Olivia and Aiden had learned how to face them together. Their relationship had evolved from one of patient and doctor to partners to equals. They didn't need the wealth and power that the world thought they should have. They didn't need the approval of anyone else. They had each other, and that was enough. And so, as they stood on the porch of the clinic one evening, the sun dipping below the horizon, Olivia leaned into Aiden. They were no longer just fighting for survival. They were building a life, and it was a life they had created together. It was filled with hope, with love, and with a promise that no matter what came their way, they would face it hand in hand. The past was behind them and the future was waiting. For Olivia, it had been a long road to get here, one filled with betrayal, heartbreak, and unimaginable pain. But now, as she looked at the man by her side, she realized that every moment had led her to this, to Aiden, to this life. And for the first time in a long time, she felt peace. For Aiden, the journey was just beginning. He had stood by Olivia through the hardest moments of her life, but now they were building something new. And while the road ahead was uncertain, one thing was clear. As long as they had each other, they would face whatever came next together. Olivia's journey from a high-powered tech mogul to a woman who reclaims her life and her values is nothing short of inspiring. Trapped in a coma for months, betrayed by her own family, and manipulated by the very system she once ruled, Olivia faced unimaginable adversity. Yet with the unwavering support of Dr. Aiden Lee, she found the strength to not only survive but thrive. Their love blossomed in the face of uncertainty, and together they rebuilt a life based on authenticity, kindness, and purpose. Olivia chose to walk away from her empire, using her wealth to create a meaningful impact through the Aiden Lee Clinic, helping those in need. The story teaches us that true strength lies not in the power we accumulate, but in how we rise from hardship, redefine our purpose, and build something real. It reminds us that love and support can transform even the darkest situations, and that standing by our values, no matter the cost, is the path to true fulfillment. If Olivia and Aiden's story resonated with you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Your support drives us to keep sharing more powerful, heartwarming stories. Stay tuned for the next inspiring journey.